All right. Super excited to invite everyone to the learning engagement formula training. We know that COVID changed the dynamics of how the world should interact with learning. And over the years, in the last 2 years, a lot of people have struggled with online learning. A large chunk of the time, I hear people say, this online learning is safe and I'm not enjoying it. It's just there. I'm not really getting impacted. If you agree with me, if you had that sort of thing, also, you can drop a comment in the chat section. And the truth is, just like every other aspect of the world that we had to learn and adapt, online learning became one of those primary things too that we had to adapt. And for a lot of people, it has been extremely difficult, extremely difficult for them to adapt to the whole changes and the whole dynamics of what learning is online. I want to say thank you to Ademola for having me on the call. Ademola is one of those guys out there that really know this and like this stuff. And it's always a pleasure to meet people that understand the dynamics and the principles of learning. So massive kudos for what you're building, bro. My name is Gabriel Balogun, and my primary focus in life every day I wake up is to help people take educative steps to put their best self and their best work into the world. I've been doing this for a decade, and in the last decade, I've been privileged to work with and for some of the brands, some of the top brands. I worked primarily with Tricia Bees to manage our edtech. I worked at Joberman at one point. I've been able to work across various industries, and this has helped build my knowledge as regards how learning should be done across these industries. And it's primarily why I call myself the multi learning and development that you outsource. What happened? But it's fine. I think we're back. Okay. Let us continue. Yeah. In 30 minutes, God help me, in 30 minutes, I will attempt to shape your thinking on simple strategies that you can begin to use to make your learning more interactive, more engaging, more exciting with your audience. If this is something that you are excited about, can you drop some comments in the chat and let's begin. Now, I'm going to walk us through 9 steps that we can begin to implement today that can help your e-learning programs and your virtual learning programs scale. Now, I like to do a lot of education before I share. A large chunk of us do not understand how the online learning space works, all right? And because they do not understand how the online learning space works, it is very difficult to build learning. At this point, I would like to share that learning is totally different from training. Learning is learner-centric. Training is instructor or facilitator or trainer-centric. All right. By basic definition, we know that learning is the accumulation of skills, knowledge, attitudes that can lead to a changed behavior. But training is the methodology through which we help people learn. It's very, very important that we get those dynamics. It is also very important to know that when we discuss digital learning has two major types of learning. So when you're trying to move training from physical to digital, you can do it in two ways. The first way is via online, which is what we popularly call the online learning, but I like to call it the online digital learning. The second way is what we call the offline digital learning. So quick examples of the offline digital learning: when you put knowledge on a flash drive and people connect to their TV to watch or connect to their system to watch. That is digital learning, but it is offline. Why? Because they do not require an internet. Now, digital online trainings are trainings that require the internet. And that one is also divided into two. I hope we're taking notes. It's also divided into two. We have the e-learning and we have the virtual learning. Now, the strategies I want to share are irrespective of this online learning that we are currently overseeing or we plan to do. All right? Forgive me, I have to take water in between so that I can manage my throat. Irrespective of whether it's e-learning or virtual learning, these strategies can work. Now, e-learning are primarily MOOCs, multiple online courses. Udemy, Coursera, all those ones where you watch a video, which is video-based. That is e-learning. Virtual learning are live sessions like this. So what we are doing is not e-learning. What we are doing is virtual learning, but it is a type of online learning. When you take a course on Udemy and Coursera, there is no live session like this. That is e-learning. Hope I'm making sense. Because I'm sharing the screen, I cannot actually see comments. I need to be able to see comments so that I know. Forgive me, it's all for us. Apparently, I don't think you can share a tab like the way you do on Google Chrome. It's fine. All right, so the number one step when you're trying to build online learning and e-learning is to grab the learner's attention, which is what I have just done. So as much as possible, I'm teaching the steps, I'm going to be practicalizing them. What I did in the last 3 minutes was to grab your attention. And what that literally means is start with something unexpected but related to the topic at hand. Now, what most trainers do is that as they move to step one like this, they just begin to talk. And that is not ideal because the people you are coming to train, you need to be able to activate their current learning. You need to be able to activate their mind. You need to be able to help them to see that they are not people that do not know anything. You need to bring them on board slowly to the training. So that is what is meant by grab the learner's attention. If I'm doing other training, sometimes I do something called the mind opener. It is usually one or two slides where I open the mind of my audience, tell them about something that will shatter every table and mindset that they have. So that's the first step. So whether it's e-learning or virtual learning, I needed to do that so that when I use these terms, we're not confused. So whether it is a video-based learning where they've already created the content, the first video they watch has to be something that would grab their attention. It could be something that is thought-provoking, It could be a controversial question for group discussion or individual reflection. It could be an icebreaker, that type of activity, or relate an interesting, relevant tale, case study, newsworthy, whatever. The goal is you need to be able to catch their attention. That's the first step. Because when you get their attention and you're already making sense, or you're already forcing them to think, or they already feel like, wow, I didn't know this before and now I know it, even before your session begins, or at the very beginning of your session, you have indirectly set the tone for the learning period. So that's how you can go a whole day's training and people are not bored. People are not tired because each part of it is an engagement, right? The next thing is to explain the objective, which is also what I did before I started telling us about virtual learning and that. The goal of this session, like I said, is to help us build engagement with our learners. There is nothing as tiring and as boring and as exhaustive as teaching and people are not responding, which is why you see that I've been trying to get the charts to see what people are saying. It's very, very essential because people need to understand the context as to which what they are learning will work for them. So for instance, if I'm training sales guys, by the time I have caught their attention, the next step is for me to explain the objective of the training. And it will be something around, oh, you know how, so I could say a simple quote like the customers would always associate the satisfaction of your product with the appearance of the salesperson. Now that will force them to think, and it will give me an opportunity to explain that it is not enough to just understand and have substance. It is also very important to have style. Because human beings are visual creatures. They see you first before they buy from you. So they have to buy into you before they buy your product. And explaining the objective, the goal is to help them see how this training they are going through would help shape what it is they are doing. Just like as I'm trying to say, as I'm explaining and I'm taking out time to teach, somewhere in our heads and notes, we are taking notes and knowing that, okay, after this, I need to be able to walk my team or my audience through what it is they'll be able to do at the end of the training session. It is primarily what we call learning objectives or learning outcomes. But as opposed to just reading, you know, in some trainings, you see this training, you will learn blah, 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 blah. As opposed to doing that, you can walk them through it without even showing them. All right? And saying at the end of this training, you'll be able to speak to people. So one of the things we do at CMAT, founders of Money Points, is to open business accounts for businesses, give them payment options, credit facilities, and business tools. And one of the things that I do when I'm teaching the sales team is to let them see that at the end of this training, guys, you'll be able to talk to anybody because of the things that you've learned. And that's why there's a lot of role playing in my training, because people have to not go beyond virtual learning to practicalizing what they learned. All right. Now, the next step, I think I might make this, okay, the recording will be available so we can go through it. The third step is to stimulate the recall of prior learning. Your goal when you're doing this is to help learners see the connection between the lessons content and their existing knowledge by asking learners to discuss their pre-existing knowledge or experiences with the topic. Now, for some of us that maybe we are training human resource personnel, and at this stage, this is when you begin to ask them to either role play or even just a top of the head question. So if I was training human resource professionals, for instance, like this now, and maybe what I was training was performance management, one of the questions I would ask would be, how do you manage performance? And then allow people to talk. What I'm doing is step 3. I'm stimulating a recall of prior knowledge. So I'm forcing my HR practitioners that are listening to me to think deep about what they've done and how they do it before they learn how to do it from me. So let's practicalize it. Everybody on the call, can we state how we currently build engagements when we're trying to teach online? I'll be looking for the comments in the chats. So can we state, what do you do when you're trying to get your audience to follow you, when you're trying to ensure that the training is not just a boring training where you're just talking and people are not listening? What do you do? Waiting for more answers. Let me take this away so that we can. Obaseki said, I don't scatter your head already. So what do we do? What do we do? Okay. Oh, okay, Obaseki, I'll do it. Please remind me once we're done so that I can go through it again. The whole digital, virtual, online thing. Okay, so Toluwani says, okay, Shigo Zirim says, I ask question. Munisola says, ask relevant questions. Okay. Toluwani says, remind them of why they are doing this in the first place. Okay. Basik says, meet them. All right, so let's continue, guys. Let's continue. Now, the fourth step is to present the content. So, in the real sense, the first three things we do must be embedded in our introduction. So as soon as we are done introducing our names and what we do, we need to be able to grab the learner's attention, either with a thought-provoking statement or an icebreaker or something that can make them think. We need to be able to explain the objective still in the same introduction. And finally, we now need to stimulate recall of prior learning. So a simple question to sales guys would be, how do you sell? What is the first thing you do when you want to close a person? That will speak, and then every other person in the class would accept or reject. All these are part of your introduction to get them to feel among. You know, sometimes trainings are made or are done in such a way that the guy's just talking, the trainer is just talking. Adult education is different from children education. For kids, you can talk. They really don't care. For adults, you need to be able to make them feel like we are all training together. And one of the primary things I do is I don't even tell people not to ask me questions. Like, if you have a question, you can ask. Because the beauty with that question is when you ask it and I respond, another person picks it up. And then we have an interactive class and everybody is vibing and everybody is gisting and everybody's talking. And we've done 5 hours, we've done 6 hours, and people are not even hungry. But if all that we're doing is talk, and they are not following up, or they are not responding, then we've lost them. So it's to present the content. Now, the presentation of the content is breaking down your content into digestible chunks that makes it easy for the learner to retain information. Now, these ideologies I'm sharing are different when you're doing a virtual training and an e-learning. Now, for virtual training, you are doing it in the moment. As I'm teaching you, see that I'm doing it. For e-learning, you have to create the content with these steps in mind. So it means that from the first video, you've already caught their attention, you've explained the objective. It's easier to implement this when you're even teaching e-learning, because as you're shooting the videos or as you're creating the courses, the e-learning content creator is just following this plan. So by the time he gets to step 4, where he's presenting the content, he's knowing that the entire content, everything they are going to learn will be 1 hour. But I'm not going to put a 1 hour video online there for them to learn. No, I'm going to break it into chunks of 15 minutes so that by the time they are done watching one video, maybe there's a test to follow. Then they watch the second video. Maybe there's a test to follow. Then they watch the third video. Like that, till they completely watch a 1 hour video. All right. But the problem with e-learning is that because you are learning alone, it is boring. And that is why they don't have completion rates. So Udemy and Coursera, for instance, have, I think maybe 2% or 3% completion rates. What that means is that for 10 people that sign up to learn, only 2 people finish. I mean, we are here now. How many of the courses have we signed up for that finished? All right, so present the content. And in your presentation of the content, you need to present them in the most appealing form. If you are speaking to market women, it will make sense to present your content in either pidgin or their language. If you go out there and you're speaking English, you may lose them. You need to be able to communicate to them in a lingua that they understand. All right. If I was speaking to teenagers, there are slangs that I would use. I'll be saying things like, oh, this lecture is giving. I'll be using all those Gen Z slangs for them so that they will like me. Let me teach you. I do a lot of sales training. So let me see this. There are 3 things needed to sell yourself. And if you're vast enough, you know that people would always buy you before they buy any other thing. Everybody is selling themselves. The question is if they are selling it rightly. Now, there are 3 things when you're trying to transfer knowledge, 3 things that would make people listen to you. It is competence, it is likability, and luck. Competence, likability, and luck. Sometimes if you have competence and people like you, you would always have luck. It is the reason why Coke is selling more than Pepsi. Sorry, it's the reason why you can have 10 people or 5 people on the street selling the same thing, but there's one woman that sells the most. They're both selling the same thing, but one woman does what is more likable. But the greatest of them is not competence. The greatest of them is likability. So as a facilitator, as an e-learning creator, as a virtual learning creator or coordinator, you need to make sure that your audience like you, because that is the fastest way they will cooperate with you. You only engage the things that you like, irrespective of whether the person knows it well or not. As long as you like that person, there's more chance for you to communicate. And if the person says jump, you will jump. If the person says type something in the comments, they'll type something in the comments. Why? Because you've portrayed a likable personality. And that has to be at the back of your mind when you are presenting your content. It is not just in the slides or in the videos. It is in the person that is delivering it. All right. And then the next thing is provide learning guidance. This is where a lot of learning and development professionals, they ignore this. So when I was at Utiva as the academic director, one of the primary things I did was, Utiva, if you don't know Utiva is one of the possibly one of the top university tech academies out of Africa, out of Nigeria and Africa, that is helping people transition into tech. And one of the things that I created when I was there, besides the curriculums, the learning platform, management system, and all that, was I introduced a learning body system. What that means is that the people that have gone through the program before, I brought them back to serve as learning assistants for the facilitator. So a Saturday class like this, the facilitator teaches for 3 hours. And the learning assistant goes back into their WhatsApp group or their community group to chat them up and say, oh, is there anything you did not learn in class? Now, the learning assistant do not go and call the facilitator. Why? Because he has gone through the program before, so he knows the program. All he's doing is he's offering learning guidance to them. So when they have questions, oh, this Excel sheet, I don't remember how this guy did it. He shows them how to do it. He hosts mini session with them, apart from the general learning session. They called it, at UTIVA then we called it court captain. But it is something I try to do in all my trainings. For instance, on this call, Ademola is the learning assistant, is the one offering learning guidance. So if I go off the call, for instance, Ademola engages you. It is different from just being a coordinator. Now, because this is a one-time class, it might not be doing 100% of what it's supposed to do. But if this was a community where this specific training was going to happen 4 times, and this was 1 out of the 4 classes, at the end of this class, the job of the learning assistant is to go back to the group where they stay and chat them up. And say, how was class today? What was your take home from Gabriel's session? What did you learn the most? Is there any place you have concerns that I can assist you with? You understand? That is why we say that you have to provide extremely clear instructions about everything. So if I do physical training, I tell them that if your phone rings, it's 1,000 naira to the pocket of the organization. So if I'm training an organization, I appoint the class captain immediately. And I say, anybody phones that rings, collect 1,000 naira from the person. But even when we go on break, that person is responsible for calling the class together. That person is responsible for taking attendance. You have to ensure that you are putting a lot of things in place to make your people engage. Now, there's not enough time. I would have walked us through the various kinds of learning. So we have instructor-led learning, mobile learning, macro learning, micro learning, and all those various types of learning. My favorite type of learning is what I call peer-to-peer. And peer-to-peer learning is people that are learning together are teaching each other. So remember when the university and the lecturer came and taught, and we did not get it. But 2 days or 3 days to the exam, we did prep class where somebody in the department, somebody in the class taught everybody in the class the same thing that we did not learn from the instructor. And we understood it better because it was our mates that was teaching us. That is what learning guidance does. It is best to always pick somebody in the class to coordinate the class. Why? Because it is a person like them and they will relate. There's no sense of authority that this person is my trainer. It is more of this one is my guy. So if he's doing it, I should be able to do it. All right. So when we say provide learning guidance, anything you can do to ensure that your learners learn better, learn faster, please put it in place. See, my voice has gone up. Me that I say my throat is failing me. So I want to take I want to look through the question. Yeah, Martin, I'm teaching Gagne's events of learning here. Yeah, I didn't want to bore us with all those big names. Maybe at the end, I'll walk us through 3 or 4 instructional designs that we should focus on. Yeah, but okay, so we're good. Let's continue. Now, this is everything I'm teaching, I'm practicalizing. This is also part of learning guidance. I'm taking a pause, I'm looking through the comments, I'm answering questions. Why? I want everybody to feel like we are doing this together. Not just me on the call talking. Because I'm calling out people's name and I'm answering their questions, they are more likely to listen. I'm more likely to work with me because, yeah, so Munisola asks very interesting questions. How do we engage senior executives? They tend to be very uptight, sizing you up and all. Good. There's something I've learned about human beings, and it's called the human bias. People would predominantly do whatever they want to do, irrespective of who stands in front of them. All right? Which means that whoever you are bringing to engage your senior executives have to be somebody that a large chunk of the class yearns to learn from. So if you're trying to train senior executives, you need to be able to blow up the profile of the instructor or the facilitator. That's one of the ways you can build engagement. You need to be able to blow up the profile. That's one. Two, the instructor has to understand human dynamics and human behavior. So from the beginning of the class, he has to start using humor. He has to do practically the things that we've taught. So he has to say something that will get their attention from the beginning. Because they are very uptight from, if you can't, one of my company, for instance, if you cannot, one of the company I work for instance, if you are talking to him and in 2 minutes, you cannot make a statement that catches his attention, he will zone out from that conversation and tell you to leave or tell you, we'll talk about this later. So whoever is teaching, whether it's you or that person, has to be able to prepare for the introduction. You need to be able to say some really deep things in the introduction that will compel them to listen. And then from there, it's just free flow. Which is why everything you do, I always tell people there is a way to start something, and there's also a way to end, especially when it comes to speaking. There's a way to begin any conversation, and there's a way to end any conversation. Check the best speakers in the world. There's always a thought-provoking statement they begin with. That compels you to listen. That compels you to think. That compels you to want to learn and hear every other things they are saying. All right, I hope I was able to answer your question. I was not sharing my screen. I'm going to share now. I was answering questions, so let's go back. All right, now, step 6 is to give your learners the opportunity to practice. Whether it is a virtual learning session or an e-learning session, or even a real-life in-person training, you need to give your learners opportunities to practice. So if it's e-learning, there has to be a test after each content, or they watch the first 3 videos and then there is a test or an exercise that they do together as a group. So maybe it's the cohort learning and they have to learn for 4 days. At the end of day 1, all right, there has to be something that they work together as a group. So you divide the team into a group and say, group 1, according to this thing, this is what we want you to do. Group 2, according to this topic, this is what we want you to do. Group 3, according to this topic, this is what we want you to do. It is absolutely out of place to demonstrate knowledge and not give your learners an opportunity to apply what they learned. All right? They need to practice. It cannot be overemphasized. They need to practice. It is very important that they practice. All right? I think that explains itself. Then, number 7, you need to provide timely and specific feedback. So if you have a class of 10, and most of the time, this works well when you're doing a cohort-based learning, where it is not a one-time. What I'm doing today is, I think of it as an online conference. It is not really a training in itself. It is like I'm just 30 minutes, 1 hour is too small for me to really teach us these things in depth. So what I'm doing is I am bouncing off things that we should know. Now, if it was a longer class, maybe I was going to be with us for four weeks. At the end of class 2 or class 1, I will make it my job to know everybody's name. I know everybody's reaction in class. And then take it upon myself to provide timely and specific feedback to each of them. So I can look at Yinka, for instance, and say, Yinka, I've noticed that you pay a lot of attention in class, and I really like that. That is a timely and specific feedback to Yinka alone. I can look at Ibrahim and say, Ibrahim, I noticed that you're always taking notes. Please continue. That is what timely specific feedback is. You need to be able to share feedback to individuals consistently. And then maybe they did a test and you say, group 1, you did an amazing job. Group 2, well, you didn't do so much of a good job. Very, very important that after you have presented the content and you've put measures in place to ensure that they learn the content, you have to give them an opportunity to practice. It is after this practice that you can now give them feedback. All right? And then now you now assess their performance. So this is usually done at the end of the training, where you give them like an exam or a project assignment or something that they have to do alone, not as a group. So most times you're giving them opportunity to practice can be something they can do as a group. But then when you're trying to assess the performance of every individual, for instance, if I'm teaching data analytics, they need to be able to have a project at the end of the training where they use Excel and SQL, for instance. And then I know someone mentioned that they learned at Utiba at one point. You would notice that if you did data analytics at the end of the SQL class, you would have to do a project. At the end of your Power BI class or your Excel class, you have to do an individual project. We'll give you a case study and ask you to do the project. And at the end of the day, you submit that project. And then we'll have a general session where we walk through how to do the project that everybody now learns. So those that didn't get it well would learn from those that got it. All right. That is how we assess performance. Performance assessment is not sending them questionnaires to fill. No. That is not how you get full attendance and full performance reviews. No. They need to be able to do the things that you taught them in class. It is not by sharing. I mean, those ones are good, but they are very feral. You share. I know a lot of corporate trainers do that. All those consultants, they'll give you form to fill at the beginning of the training. And then at the end of the training, they'll give you another form to fill. People lie on those forms, brothers and sisters. But people cannot lie when you give them a project to do. If they don't know it, it's proof to you that they don't know it. So if you have a class of 10 and maybe only 7 do it, it means that the remaining 3, you have to find a way to ensure that they get it. Or you have to appoint out of the 7, 2 or 3 of them to now reteach those 3 people. All right. And then finally, you have to enhance retention and transfer. This is what Merrill calls integration. So Merrill's Press Principles of Instructions is also another instructional model. And he calls this integration. Now, what this means is if, for instance, they learned how to sell a specific product, the training was how to sell a specific product. And then you've done a practical session. You've taught them how to do it. You've made sure everything is in place to ensure that they learn it. Mini tests, mini assessments, and all that. And then you now give them an opportunity to practice through role play and all that. You provide feedback and say, oh, in your role play, you did this way. Next time, do it this way. And then you give them a task or an exam or something, or you throw them into the wild to go and do it. At the end, they need to be able to take that knowledge and use it in real world. They need to be able to, if someone learns leadership, the leadership training, for instance, you need to be able to call up the line manager and say, I want you to give this person an opportunity to lead on something for the next 2 weeks. And then you are watching him as the line manager. You are ensuring that the things he learned about leadership is practicalizing it. Delegation, communication, is doing all those things. Because when we learn something, the best that we retain is just, how do I used to remember this, I can't remember again. So don't let me guess the percentage. But I know that we retain knowledge when we do things than when we just teach things or sit down to listen to things. All right. So beyond what they have sat in class to learn, there has to be an opportunity for them to integrate their knowledge into real life solutions. All right. It is very, very, very important. All right. On this note, I think I am done with my slides. And I want to say thank you everyone for listening. That primarily will be all, folks. Now will be an opportunity to ask questions